awaiting orders, Servicebot here for another episode. With today being one of the uniquest episodes I've ever done considering the scale and size of the channel I'll be covering today. I would like to introduce Patrick CC, who initially got his start after documentations about hip-hop artists started to expand out to TV shows, Disney, and whatever he happens just to find his fancy in that particular week when he uploads. Which lands him into my realm, as a channel that is aspiring to draw and review more content in general that happens to be about movies and media that is inspired to some capacity by animation. I found this video to be troublesome. Let's explain exactly why. To illustrate how harsh I'll be in the upcoming minutes, I need for you to understand that what Patrick CC makes here are video essays. Meaning that there is an intentionality and deliberateness behind every word that is uttered, spoken, and written down for recording purposes. There is a structure to highlight and to hyper-focus on a particular idea that will congeal and be profound by the time it is all said and done. Often enough, the mystique of video essays is the feeling of authority, informative nature, and more importantly, the unbiased nature that the creator often tries to espouse their ideas from. Meaning, for the most part, you feel as though that even if there is a particular belief or idea or thought that is carried by the creator in question, they did an exceptional job to keep their biases in check to ensure that they put forth a compelling case about a particular subject matter that they'll be covering for the video going forward. However, that is not the case with today's video. Let's examine. In the spirit of the video that was created by Patrick CC, I decided that it would be apropos to make a video essay myself, and I will compartmentalize and segment particular aspects that I think are important to do so, starting with Rachel, the actor for Snow White.
Let's see how they are formed.
Getting into its packaging, it's vitriolic in nature. Entitled No Name Actress destroys Disney classic.
Also demanded she be paid more for, quote, standing in a dress for 18 hours.
She's demanding higher wages for standing in a dress for 18 hours, which is the average time a human being's supposed to be awake. This is on top of the demanding nature of acting, staying on cue, remembering your lines, consistently bringing the emotional weight required for a particular scene. This is all the while not knowing how many days she had to consistently do this. I think you need to make more of a compelling case as to why this is controversial, considering that the movie is using these box office draws of these large actors and one with an exceptional debut to draw people to the movie theaters to see this movie. Simply treating it as though it's just self-evident relies on a pre-existent animosity for the person in question. Then, this clip shows up later in the video with her saying she's a narcissist.
Suspicions about her were correct.
I'm a narcissist.
And yet,
but wait, let's actually examine where this clip comes from.
Right, and it is I have to pretend like, oh God, well, crazy that we're in front of this.
Wait, how often are you in line for the Snow White ride?
I'm a narcissist. I don't know. It's always like my publicist Ashton was with me the last time it happened, and I was like, God, I hope no one, because every time they come up to me, I'm always online for this freaking ride, and they think it's like I'm standing there waiting for the photo op, being like,
well, you kind of are, you know?
No, I guess
it's like
so.
if Harrison Ford's not standing outside of Indiana Jones going, hey, everybody, want to twist the rope?
Yeah, you want to touch my hat? Like, I don't know. It's just the weirdest thing, but it always happens to me, and I'm always have to just pretend that I don't always spend my time here, I swear to God.
Is that your favorite ride? I mean, that's a weird thing that you are Snow White now.
I mean, It's one of the original. I'm a really big Disney fan. I grew up at the Disney parks. My parents took me every summer.
Oh, you did?
Yeah,
okay.
So it's like, it's a part of my upbringing. It's my favorite things.
Oh, it's sarcastically stated in reference to the fact that she's gone to Disneyland multiple times throughout the years, and due to her recent casting of Snow White, people like to have a picture with her next to the ride. And jokingly, she says that people will assume she's a narcissist because she's there every year, when in actuality, it's a family tradition. Mind you, this is all the build-up that Patrick CC is using before actually getting into the more compelling criticisms, but just doing some rudimentary research shows that there's a slight misrepresentation of what is occurring here. Patrick CC brings up how she knocks it out of the park in her debut, getting a reward, and so the coals are very hot when it comes to her acting prowess, as well as people being eager to see her in more things. Ideally, it seems to be fitting that they would now want to cast her in a Disney IP.
Keep her politically charged opinions to herself started to cause problems for Disney executives. As if West Side Story wasn't already a massive introduction to Hollywood, her next role was even bigger, one that could set her up for a lifetime of success, and that was being cast as Snow White in Disney's live-action remake of the classic. Rachel chose to make this monumental announcement on Twitter where she wrote, "Yes, I am Snow White. No, I am not bleaching my skin for the role." Rachel deleted this tweet shortly after sending it out to the world.
I find it particularly odd that this is presented as being controversial without Patrick CC even being remotely curious as to why she felt the need to delete this tweet. Now, mind you, Patrick CC will present the idea that it was a minority of the audience.
The first place was to address the criticism she was receiving online. In the original fairy tale and the 1937 animated film, Snow White is depicted as having skin as white as snow. It is quite literally the inception of the princess's identity. But Rachel Zegler is of Colombian descent and has more of an olive skin tone. Now, there definitely were some extreme takes, suggesting that Disney is evil and only casting POC characters to cause outrage. There were also some blatantly racist takes, but most people were just genuinely confused why Snow White wasn't going to be white.
That believe this to be something meaningful. However, I can just point you to Twitter discourse and show you that there was a larger sum of individuals that had highly racially charged remarks about Rachel being Snow White than the way that is presented within the video, where he uses Reddit with little to no engagement and uses a large post showing that most people didn't have any racially discriminatory reasons as to why she couldn't be Snow White. Aesthetically speaking, this is one of the situations where I would agree with most people to say that Snow White, aesthetically speaking, is supposed to be pale, white as snow. It is the descriptor that is used here. However, I do not like the downplaying of clearly racially motivated argumentum that was occurring at the time period when people were objecting to her being Snow White. I doubt if it was just a minority of individuals, she would feel compelled to tweet about it, and more importantly, she wouldn't feel compelled to delete said tweet.
Do with her skin color. She said, "It fell back to another version of Snow White that was told in history, where she survived a snowstorm that occurred when she was a baby, and so the king and queen decided to name her Snow White to remind her of her resilience. One of the core points in our film for any young woman or young person is remembering how strong you actually are. And while this may seem like a small nuance that doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, it was an insight into the major changes that were coming next. Her unapologetic attitude on the red carpet continued to stir the pot, and she just kept making it worse, specifically during the writer's strike of 2023. The Writers Guild of America represents thousands of writers in film, TV, radio, and online media. They are the backbone of Hollywood's content. Despite their importance, Hollywood executives restructured the industry to drastically reduce residual payments, leaving most writers with little to no income after their work is uploaded to apps like Netflix, Hulu, HBO Max, etc. So the guild went on a strike to renegotiate and push for higher pay. Rachel Zegler also used her voice to support the strike.
If I'm going to stand there 18 hours in a dress of an iconic Disney princess, I deserve to be paid for every hour that it is streamed online.
She's like everything people hate about this generation distilled into a single person. At this point, I'm sure you are noticing a pattern. While we hope that deep down Rachel's intentions are pure, and we hope that she truly is just trying to have an overall positive impact on the world, she has a terrible way of expressing her opinions.
Now, this is another instance that feels insanely misrepresentative. Watching the video in its entirety, the source it came from, Entertainment Tonight, you hear her speaking about how she's in support of the Writers Guild.
My name is Rachel Zegler. I'm an actor and I'm a proud member of SAG-AFTRA. I
stand in solidarity with the Writers Guild of America to get better wages for everyone involved. Thank you so much.
Yet that is completely missing within Patrick CC's example here. Without said example, it seems to be extremely self-centered and opportunistic for her to use the Writers Guild incident that is occurring within Hollywood as a way to describe how she is not being properly compensated.
Went on a strike to renegotiate and push for higher pay. Rachel Zegler also used her voice to support the strike.
If I'm going to stand there 18 hours in a dress of an iconic Disney princess, I deserve to be paid for every hour that it is streamed online.
She's like everything people hate about this generation distilled into a single person. At this point, I'm sure you are noticing a pattern. While we hope that deep down Rachel's intentions are pure, and we hope that she truly is just trying to have an overall positive impact on the world, she has a terrible way of expressing her opinions.
But that's just not what happened. And people might be wondering why I'm spending such an extensive amount of time in researching certain elements of this video, because once again, it's a video essay. There are no offhanded examples. This is to ensure that the audience perceives her as self-centered and selfish and completely inconsiderate to what this strike was about. My characterization of what he's doing here is not by happenstance. It is the deliberate intentionality of the results of how he's structuring this video.
And Rachel Zegler's response to the box office failure was nothing short of delusional.
And to everyone who hates when I win, the winged victory came to the Louvre in pieces, and people still line up to see her. And I can only hope that despite my flaws, and despite my cracks and my breaks, and there are many of them, that at every premiere and everything I do, people will wait in line to see.
People who already thought Zegler was a narcissist have officially confirmed their feelings after seeing this statement. They suspected she was trying to make this film about her. They suspected that she did not care for the legacy of Disney and that all she wanted was the spotlight for herself.
I'm sorry, I just don't see how she's a narcissist because of this. She states in this video that despite her flaws and criticism she's gotten, that people still come to see her movies because there's a quality that exists outside of your personal feelings about the individual in question. Now that we've done with the main target of the video, I think it's important to now address the structural nature of this video and how Patrick CC took some things that people might be indifferent about and tried to make it more incendiary for the purposes of creating animosity for the actress in question.
Water flows down the glacier and plays a part in shaping the land.
So let's talk about Walt Disney. Walt Disney's word is often used as an authority for the franchise Snow White, repeatedly stating that he did not want any sequels created of this legendary movie.
Walt Disney himself is turning in his grave because he personally requested that the company should never change, alter, or remake Snow White. Walt Disney himself was extremely protective of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. This was essentially his baby. Walt reportedly rejected multiple ideas for sequels, including a proposed short called Snow White Returns, and was adamant that the original story should not be altered or expanded, as he believed Snow White was a standalone masterpiece that should remain untouched.
A flagship bearer in terms of Disney's success and what would be the most defining trait for Disney's success going forward. Primarily that they would be movies about princesses. Knowing this much, you would have assumed that Disney's involvement is far more than just being an executive producer and an overseer of the company. Well, that's just the thing.
It was Walt's company. He put the people in place, he approved the ideas and hustled with his brother to get the bread and team together for everything that they wanted to do. He did Mickey's voice until he couldn't do it anymore. He looked for the opportunity for animation, and even when there weren't any, he found a way to convince people that there were some anyway. But that's kind of where it stops. Walt never directed a movie. He never drew any storyboards or animated any of the dwarves. But yet, it's his name that we think of when we think of the hand that created Mickey Mouse. We think of him when we think of Snow White, Pinocchio, Dumbo. So How did we get here?
Let's just address Snow White as it is. It is a adaptation of the original story, meaning that this isn't a holistically original IP, as we often like to push it up to a pedestal. Most of the most recognizable stories from Disney's were adaptations from already well-known stories. Of course, with some alterations that could be accredited to the writers shown here, but the biggest problem here is that often enough when it comes to the legacy of Disney and its legendary run in animation, his existence and his involvement is often overstated. In fact, most people contribute the existence and creation of Mickey Mouse to Walt Disney, when that simply is not true.
Legend Les Clark all left Universal and went back to the drawing board. Ub was the one who sat at his desk and not only sketched and designed Mickey Mouse, he animated the first cartoon on his own, by hand, 700 drawings a day in like 2 weeks. I'd even go as far to say that the nigga Walt never animated Mickey Mouse. As far as I know, he ain't even touched the damn pen since Oswald. Think about that clip I played earlier of Walt talking about how he drew Mickey Mouse on a train.
I'd been producing a series of pictures for a company there. They were about a rabbit called Oswald. But I lost that. They took it away from me, so I was all alone and had nothing.
The nigga said, I was alone. Like, what do you even mean? The homies quit with you.
The video that was shown on screen was from Toon Tariq. I'll link it in the description, but I think it's worth emphasizing how much people just misguidedly so try to emphasize this notion that he is everything and more, when Walt Disney sometimes rob people of the proper credit, and I feel as though painting him in a sort of innocent royalty sort of lighting feels undeserving, especially when we understand the reality of who Walt Disney was. Not to say that the success of the company can be contributed to him, but often enough, as I've stated prior, it is overstated. Now understanding how blame is often undeservedly put at the feet of the wrong people and how credit is often enough given to the wrong people, let's just talk about the film in of itself. The film has writers, and while Rachel has extensively given her opinions about the remake and the importance and influence about what the ideas are, ultimately speaking, she wasn't a writer for the movie, meaning she was cast for the role, but she had no meaningful involvement in how the film's screenplay came out to be. Rachel doesn't have a single writing credit, and while Patrick CC's video never outright states that she had any involvement, the way they use her opinions about said script are implicitly implied.
Zegler insisted that the Snow White remake was based on an alternative version of the story, one that doesn't have to do with her skin color. It was going to be a disaster, particularly in this Variety interview where she talked about how she and the writers are giving Snow White a modern twist.
As much, using the blame for people's reception of said script squarely at her own feet when she didn't write the screenplay, guys. Or perhaps the completely unavoidable mess of the 7 dwarves and them deciding to do CGI dwarves rather than actually hiring little people to be cast as the 7.
These look like medieval times reenactors at the local fair. Disney quickly responded and said that these were not pictures of the actual set, but nobody believed them. The only reason Disney planned on changing the dwarves in the first place was because of a comment made by Hollywood star Peter Dinklage, who felt that the new rendition of the movie was not progressive enough.
I was a little taken back by they're very proud to cast a Latino actress as Snow White.
Yeah.
But you're still telling the story of Snow White,
yeah.
7 dwarves.
Sure.
So you take a step back and look at what you're doing there.
Yeah.
I know. That makes no sense to me.
Well,
you're progressive in one way, but you're still making that backward story of 7 dwarves living in a cave. What the are you doing, man?
Even dwarves. More importantly, in a video titled The Way It Is, what the fuck is this even doing in the video? It has nothing to do with her involvement, and it's just kind of padding out the runtime at this point. If the video was simply labeled Snow White is a disastrous movie, then you could have gotten away with this, but this is clearly an attempt to pose all the problems and growing pains of the movie squarely at our feet, while also devoting a segment to something that is completely out of our control. Now that that's all dealt with, let's get political.
This country is typical of a post-glacial area.
I had apprehensions about doing this part because sometimes I feel as though people don't really understand the magnitude of what they're discussing, and I'll try my best to be civil and respectful, but no promises here.
2023 and 2024, that Gal and Rachel may have developed some tension. As you can see in this interview, Gal is being professional, looking and smiling while Zegler is speaking. But whenever Gal is speaking, Zegler refuses to look at her, often looking down at her feet or off to the side. Their body language screams that there is tension between them, and these assumptions would be proven true. When Disney released the official trailer for Snow White, Rachel thanked the fans for their support, receiving over 120 million views in 24 hours. She used that big moment to make a political statement. And always remember, Free Palestine. While some saw this as an honorable act of solidarity, others interpreted it as a jab at her co-star. Gal Gadot is Israeli and even served in their military. Gal has been outwardly supportive of her country, specifically posting support for the IDF and civilian hostages taken during the October 7th Hamas attack.
So in the current campaign since 23, there has been 48,000 people that have been reportedly died as a byproduct of Israel's campaign. It is something that has riled up a lot of people, and it is being described as a genocide.
There are a number of bakeries that have shut down. 25 of them, the World Food Program says, have been shut down because they don't have fuel or flour. And so that reinforces the voices who are urging for there to be some type of ceasefire, Diane, at the very least, to allow critical aid, food and aid to get into Gaza for those families who are caught in the middle.
Whether that be through the removal of people through certain areas and forcibly taking people into inhumane circumstances and situations, which could be a problem for everyone involved. It's got extremely emotionally charged aspects to it, and when you have a co-star who has not only been a part of the IDF but has served and has spoken out about said subject matter, I think anyone who feels diametrically opposed will express themselves very passionately about said subject matter. Let's say that it wasn't even related to the movie. Let's say she said something that wasn't even attached to said movie. Oh, well, wait, she actually did.
All of this could have been avoided if they just left politics out of a children's movie. But Zegler was insistent on making her political opinion heard at any opportunity she could.
Vote for Kamala Harris. And it's actually non-negotiable. Our rights are on the line, folks. Our reproductive rights. Come on. Go vote blue. And if you disagree with this sentiment, just hit the unfollow button. I don't need your business.
That, and you still included it despite it wasn't being in the promotion of Snow White.
Better time than immediately after the election of President Donald Trump. She posted on her Instagram story, "I find myself speechless in the midst of this. Another 4 years of hatred, leaning us towards a world I do not want to live in. Leaning us towards a world that will be hard to raise my daughter in." She doesn't have a daughter, by the way. Leaning us towards a world that will force her to have a baby she doesn't want. Leaning us towards a world that is fearful. I shouldn't be this shocked, but I am. I am heartbroken for my friends who awoke fear this morning, and I am here with you. To cry, to yell, to hug, to wax poetic on how the left continues to fail us in forging a new path forward. This loss should not have been, and it certainly should not have been by so many votes. May Trump supporters and Trump voters and Trump himself never know peace.
Using her response to what happened in the recent election where they're trying to destroy Medicaid.
$2 trillion, trillion with a T, out of the federal government's budget. Let's watch.
It's going to mean cuts. It's going to mean cuts to the 24% of the discretionary spending that we have. And it's also going to mean looking long term at the front end of some programs like Social Security and Medicare. Not taking
that it was created for that to be the case. FDR intended it to be constructed so that, as he put it, no damn politician could attack it. That's why it has its own dedicated funding source. Dwight Eisenhower said politicians could attack it, but they would be booted out of office very quickly. It should be the third rail because it is created to be the solid, reliable source of income in retirement and in disability and for survivors.
There's tariffs that are causing $4 trillion deficits within the stock market.
Today, the S&P 500 slid to its lowest level since September as investors brace for what President Trump calls Tariff Liberation Day on Wednesday. That's when he's promising to roll out his long-planned reciprocal tariffs on nations. On top of that, U.S. tariffs on foreign-made autos and auto parts will also go into effect. The president telling NBC's Kristen Welker he couldn't care less if foreign automakers raised prices on consumers. And Politico reports that even some of Trump's closest advisors are unsure exactly what he's planning to do with all these tariffs.
Being one of the people who were the front runners in support of ejecting Roe v. Wade out of legal standing to ensure that it was up to the states, which results in it more than likely allowing states to make abortion in certain areas of the United States illegal, which is ultimately the goal, while espousing unhinged lies like Democrats want abortions up to 9 months.
Remember that the Democrats are the radical ones on this position because they support abortion up to and even beyond the 9th month. The concept of having an abortion in the later months and even execution after birth, and that's exactly what it is. The baby is born, the baby is executed after birth, is unacceptable, and almost everyone agrees with that.
All the while, the FBI has been given unmitigated and unfettered power to abduct people in broad daylight, or having people sent back to the country without due process.
The Trump administration, almost every week, snatch people right off the streets for political speech. The latest, most chilling example happened yesterday outside Boston, when a PhD student and Fulbright scholar at Tufts University, in this country on a student visa from Turkey, totally legal, obviously, was taken off a residential street in Somerville, Massachusetts at 5:15 p.m. yesterday. Ramesa Ozturk had just left her apartment when she's approached by a guy in a dark hoodie and hat who then grabs her hands. You can see and hear how upset and scared she is, as an officer finally pulls out a badge and appears to identify himself as law enforcement. She is quickly surrounded by half a dozen, I guess, cops, all in street clothes, covering their faces with masks. They take her cell phone. They physically remove her backpack. She is then handcuffed as a bystander films and asks how anyone is supposed to know these people are police.
Deported 17 more immigrants to El Salvador over the weekend. They were allegedly members of a Venezuelan gang. Secretary of State Marco Rubio called the removals a, quote, successful counterterrorism operation. This occurred after a federal judge had blocked the administration from invoking a rare wartime authority to deport hundreds of immigrants without due process. The president was sharply critical of that judge, and it comes as he's also taken aim at major law firms for representing clients or cases that conflict with his administration.
There's an unspoken level of moral culpability when people have voted to have this person in power and to operate in such unethical ways, naturally resulting in it not just being a difference of opinion and something that most of the country can just simply ignore when there are direct effects on people's everyday lives. I can understand that some people might not want to engage in politics. However, there are a large subsection of the country that I currently reside in that are directly impacted in things that other people have the luxury to just simply ignore, whether it's things transpiring in my own country or the conflict that is currently transpiring within Gaza, and some celebrities have took it upon themselves to address that harsh reality. I suppose the only people worthy of your praise in that confine is those who are willing to tell off celebrities.
Another 4 years of hatred, leaning us towards a world I do not want to live in. leaning us towards a world that will be hard to raise my daughter in. She doesn't have a daughter, by the way.
It's almost like she acknowledges that she's talking about the world that will be coming in the foreseeable future. And yes, she is completely shoving her political opinions down everyone's throat when she expresses them on her own personal social media account.
This sent the media into an all-out frenzy, particularly conservative media, who were shocked that Disney was allowing their star to publicly condemn half the country.
Hello, Disney, you're gonna have to redo your film again, because this woman is a pig, and you fired Gina Carano for far less than this nonsense.
Rachel finally crossed a line. Disney was officially fed up with her and decided to take action.
Why? Why did you pick this clip? No, genuinely asking, with everything I laid out that the current administration is doing, and Rachel being opposed to that, versus Gina Carano, whose backlash includes confirming voter fraud fervor after it getting extensively proven to not be the case with predominantly conservative judges, voter fraud that was so palpable within the audience that it led to an insurrection of our nation.
Witnesses saw on January 6th. Let's see the video, please. But please be advised that it contains graphic images and strong language, which many may find disturbing.
Hey, brother, we're boots on the ground here. We're moving on to Capitol now. I'll give you a boots on the ground update here in a few.
Multiple capital entries! Multiple capital entries! We're still taking metal, sharpened objects, missiles, to include bottles and rocks, and hand-thrown chemical-grade fireworks.
I can't imagine anything more divisive than that. Mocking COVID vaccine precautions during a time where numbers were mounting significantly, and claiming that having a difference of opinion is similar to being a Jew in the Holocaust. Yes, all that is permissible, but Rachel simply saying that she won't bleach her skin to be more similar, visually speaking, to the Snow White character is taboo, I suppose.
Some reports suggest is actually closer to $300 million after reshoots and marketing costs. That means they had a whopping 70% loss, making it one of Disney's biggest box office bombs in recent history. This performance is nearly exactly the same as The Little Mermaid. It had the same budget and had a very similar opening weekend. However, The Little Mermaid was actually a pretty good remake with positive reviews. Fans later decided to give the movie a shot, which resulted in a $569 million worldwide box office earner. And as easy as it is to continuously blame her for the failure of this film, it's only fair to admit that Rachel Zegler's performance was actually decent. She is a great singer, and she definitely performed well considering most of what makes the film actually bad was outside of her control. Like most Disney live-action remakes, Snow White just felt a bit bland and lacked the magic of the original. The CGI looked cheap, the colors are dull and boring, the evil queen didn't feel very evil at all. These remakes often struggle to capture the same charm, making them feel like a corporate cash grab.
And this is particularly the reason I decided to make this video. The cognitive dissonance that has been permeating throughout the entire video. Political discourse to the success of a video game, TV show, or any particular media you happen to fancy simply does not matter. I love media criticism. I'm all for over and laborious analysis of some of my favorite IPs that have ever existed, and watching multiple hour-long analysis about the exact same show by different creators. I'm infatuated with the process of creating these videos as well as consuming the environment around me. But I often find that critics overstate their importance. While some critics understand the subjectivity that plays into entertainment, some critics go out of the way to overstate their opinion, believing it to be the objective fact of the matter. Take Big Mouth for instance. I Hate Everything made it a video about how Big Mouth was the worst show on Netflix.
Aside of the 13-year-old kids who are currently going through the same thing as the ones in the show, I don't really know who else this show is for because of how superficial the storytelling is. There are no greater themes you have to take a moment to think about that are even remotely interesting or new. There's nothing that satirical about the setting aside from a couple of examples. It's all simplistic enough for a 13-year-old to understand. In fact, this is the kind of thing I probably would have loved as a 13-year-old boy. It's edgy, out there, offensive, and rude, but I've already gone through everything in this show in my real life already, and that was awful enough on its own. Why would I want to be reminded of all that horrible torture if you're not going to put a clever spin on it?
And many other people were right to ripple into it with their ire about how abhorrent of a series it was. However, the series went on to have 7 seasons, I believe, and a spin-off television show.
Yes, your team members will be hormone monsters.
Our division's orgasm numbers just came in, and corporate is fucking pissed.
Shame wizards.
Good call mentioning what a knockout her sister is in your wedding toast.
Ralph, the movie maker, spoke extensively about how poorly made the Transformers series was, but again, that is a franchise that has gotten multiple movies, including spin-offs.
There's a war raging on our planet. If this criminal isn't found, that war may find its way here.
This is what most people would dub the silent majority. Might not take the time to write extensive reviews to reinforce the opinions they might have about a particular piece of media, but they watch and enjoy nevertheless. They don't feel the need to have their opinions known. Simply being in attendance is enough. The reason me laying out all this groundwork? Well, the following clip
is nearly exactly the same as The Little Mermaid. It had the same budget and had a very similar opening weekend. However, The Little Mermaid was actually a pretty good remake with positive reviews. Fans later decided to give the movie a shot, which resulted in a $569 million worldwide box office earnings.
The example put forth is the Ariel movie, and despite all the racial discourse about how Ariel shouldn't be black, people just watched the movie, and at the end of the day, they realized that it was just a good movie overall. And that's the case for the majority of these movies. The Lion King movie got railed relentlessly. However, its success in the box office speaks for itself and is the reason why it came out with the movie Mufasa.
I heard his father say he doesn't want this stray.
This is the cognitive dissonance I was speaking about.
The internet outrage is not fake. When people say, hey, your main character is insufferable and I will not spend my money to see this movie, they're not lying. When people say they genuinely want politics to remain out of a children's movie, they are not lying.
Entire culture has normalized homosexuality. But the problem is, if you normalize homosexuality, then you have to normalize it for young people too. This is where I actually think that the left makes stronger arguments than the right. If homosexual behavior is totally normal, totally fine, no questions about it whatsoever, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, many pagans, everyone who is, though not those Greeks, they got a little frisky with each other. But if the vast majority of people who have ever thought about these questions were all totally wrong, and there's no moral question whatsoever about homosexual behavior, then why shouldn't it be normalized for teenagers too?
The direct acknowledgement that there were extenuating factors that are completely out of their control, yet this video is packaged in such a way where it lays all the blame directly at her feet. Keeping politics out of our media is merely just somebody looking for a confirmation bias for irrational hatred towards somebody with pretty tamed and sensible beliefs. This is why I chose this video in particular to represent what I hate about video essays. There's this sort of cognitive dissonance that is merely in one aspect or another trying to serve a particular audience and hate monger over something that sensibly and practically speaking doesn't simply exist. I will not personally abide by the social principles of people who, whenever somebody says something equally as controversial, who happen to be conservative, then go on to say people shouldn't lose their jobs just because they have a difference of opinion. Or are only willing to acknowledge when somebody says something completely unhinged by trying to appeal to double standards as the reason to be dismissing why it occurs. I simply just will not. And more importantly, you shouldn't either. That's everything for me. I'm Servicebot. And until next time, peace.